A quiet hotel maid carrying coffee was the last person anyone expected to interrupt a $12 billion international deal. The billionaires laughed. Until America's most feared mafia boss realized she was the only person in the room telling the truth. What happened next didn't just save billions of dollars. It uncovered a betrayal that changed the future of an empire forever. At 9:03 a.m., inside the most secure ballroom in Manhattan, $12 billion was 3 minutes away from disappearing. The International Shipping Summit had transformed the top floor of the Halston Grand Hotel into a fortress of polished marble, diplomatic flags, private security, and silent suspicion. The world's richest investors sat beside government representatives, foreign ministers, shipping magnates, and men whose names were never printed in newspapers. Some controlled ports. Others controlled politicians. A few controlled entire criminal networks from behind respectable companies. Every person in the room had come to witness one agreement: the final merger of 3 major shipping corridors linking New York, Tokyo, and the Mediterranean. At the center of it all stood Damien Moretti. To Wall Street, he was a billionaire logistics executive with unmatched influence over American shipping. To the underworld, he was the ruthless king of the Moretti Empire, a man known for absolute power, calculated control, and loyalty that could never be purchased twice. He wore a tailored midnight black suit, a silver watch, and the calm expression of someone who had survived every betrayal meant to destroy him. The agreement would make his empire nearly untouchable. That was exactly why half the room wanted him to fail. Minutes before the meeting began, Damien's trusted interpreter, Luca Ferraro, lifted a glass of water and suddenly collapsed beside the conference table. The sound of crystal striking marble cut through the room like a warning. Security moved instantly. Medical staff rushed forward. Conversations became frightened whispers as Luca was carried into a private service corridor, barely conscious. One of Damien's doctors returned moments later with a face that revealed more than his words. The collapse appeared deliberate. Something had been placed in Luca's drink. Fear entered the ballroom quietly. The foreign delegation had arrived with strict communication rules. The Italian representatives refused to negotiate in English, while the Japanese trade ministers required every legal statement to be translated precisely before approval. Damien's backup interpreter had been delayed by a security shutdown across Midtown. Every second of hesitation threatened penalty clauses worth millions. If the meeting collapsed, rival syndicates would seize the abandoned routes before sunset. Across the room, several competing mafia leaders concealed their satisfaction behind expensive coffee cups and polite expressions. They had expected a business summit. Instead, they were watching a king lose control of his empire in public. Panic spread beneath the surface. Lawyers whispered over conflicting documents. A nervous junior translator began interpreting the opening terms, but his Italian lacked precision and his Japanese carried dangerous gaps. One sentence about shared port authority became permanent foreign ownership. Another statement about temporary security cooperation became exclusive military access. Each mistake pulled the agreement closer to disaster. No one noticed the quiet maid moving between the tables. Olivia Carter wore a simple black hotel uniform, flat shoes, and a white apron tied neatly at her waist. Her chestnut hair was secured in a low bun, and her expression remained carefully neutral as she refilled coffee cups for people who never looked at her face. To the investors, diplomats, and mafia captains, she was invisible. That invisibility had protected her for years. What none of them knew was that Olivia spoke 5 languages fluently. She had grown up moving between American military bases overseas with her diplomat mother, learning Italian in Rome, Japanese in Yokohama, French in Brussels, and Spanish in Madrid. Years later, after one family scandal destroyed their reputation, Olivia had abandoned that world and chosen a quiet life where no one expected anything from her. But as she moved close to the negotiation table, every incorrect translation struck her like an alarm. Her heart pounding, Olivia listened as the junior interpreter changed the meaning of a final protection clause. The Japanese minister's expression hardened. The Italian delegation exchanged confused glances. Damien remained still, but the coldness in his eyes deepened. He understood that something was wrong, even if he could not yet identify the danger. Olivia hesitated beside the silver coffee service. Speaking would expose everything she had hidden. Staying silent would allow powerful men to sign an agreement they did not understand. She told herself it was not her responsibility. She was only a maid. No one had asked for her help. No one in that room would ever believe she could protect a billion-dollar negotiation. Then the Japanese delegation began closing its folders. Damien rose slowly, preparing to walk away rather than surrender authority under false terms. Rival leaders watched with barely concealed triumph. The entire Moretti empire seemed balanced on one final breath. Olivia placed the coffee pot down. Her hands trembled, but her voice did not. "Sir, your interpreter translated that sentence incorrectly." Olivia's quiet words seemed to stop time itself. The enormous conference hall, moments earlier filled with overlapping conversations and hurried negotiations, fell into complete silence. Every executive, diplomat, investor, and syndicate leader turned toward the young maid standing beside the coffee cart. Her simple black uniform looked strangely out of place among custom Italian suits and luxury watches worth more than most people's homes. For several uncomfortable seconds nobody spoke. Then a few wealthy executives exchanged amused smiles before quiet laughter spread across one side of the room. One American investor leaned back in his chair, shaking his head with obvious disbelief. Another executive whispered that hotel staff should remain invisible instead of interrupting international negotiations. Even some of Damien Moretti's own business advisors looked embarrassed by the interruption. To them, Olivia was simply a maid who had wandered beyond her place. No one imagined she possessed knowledge valuable enough to influence a $12 billion agreement. Damien, however, did not laugh. The king of the Moretti empire remained perfectly still, studying Olivia with calm, unreadable eyes. Throughout his life, Damien had learned that confidence rarely announced itself loudly. The people who truly possessed exceptional ability usually spoke with quiet certainty rather than arrogance. Olivia showed no desire to impress anyone. Despite the pressure surrounding her, she stood respectfully with lowered hands and steady breathing, waiting for permission rather than demanding attention. That alone separated her from nearly everyone else inside the ballroom. Damien finally broke the silence. His deep voice remained controlled as he asked only one question. What exactly was translated incorrectly? Olivia lowered her eyes respectfully before answering. She never challenged the interpreter directly or embarrassed anyone publicly. Instead, she politely asked whether she might translate only the last sentence exactly as it appeared in the original Italian document. Damien gave a small nod. The room watched with growing curiosity while Olivia stepped closer to the conference table, her heart pounding beneath the calm expression she struggled to maintain. She first repeated the original Italian statement with flawless pronunciation, every syllable carrying the effortless rhythm of a native speaker. Without hesitation, she translated it into perfect English before carefully explaining that one legal phrase concerning operational oversight had been misunderstood. The clause did not transfer permanent authority over shipping terminals as everyone believed. It referred only to temporary emergency coordination during international maritime disruptions. The distinction seemed small, yet legally it changed the entire agreement. Before anyone could respond, Olivia continued. She respectfully addressed the Japanese delegation in fluent Japanese, explaining the same clause using legal terminology commonly recognized within Tokyo's commercial shipping regulations. Her pronunciation remained precise, natural, and confident. Finally, she clarified how both translations matched the original contract drafted months earlier by international maritime attorneys. The atmosphere inside the ballroom transformed instantly. The Japanese ministers quietly reopened their folders. The Italian delegation exchanged surprised looks before nodding in complete agreement. One elderly diplomat smiled for the first time that morning. Several lawyers hurriedly compared Olivia's explanation with the official documents before slowly realizing she was absolutely correct. What had appeared to be a collapsing negotiation moments earlier suddenly became perfectly understandable. Damien watched everything without interrupting. He had negotiated across Europe and Asia for years. He recognized native fluency the moment he heard it. Olivia wasn't merely multilingual. She understood legal nuance, diplomatic protocol, and cultural phrasing with extraordinary precision. Skills like hers required years of elite international experience, not casual study. Yet she stood before him wearing the uniform of a hotel maid, quietly serving coffee as though none of it mattered. The negotiations resumed almost immediately. Confidence returned to the room. Investors relaxed, diplomats resumed discussions, and revised documents moved once again between both delegations. Millions of dollars that had nearly disappeared only minutes earlier remained safely on the table. Damien's empire had been protected by the one person everyone else had ignored. Across the ballroom, however, rival syndicate leaders observed Olivia with entirely different expressions now. Earlier they had dismissed her as invisible. Now they studied her carefully, whispering among themselves while discreet security personnel memorized her face. In their world, rare talent was never overlooked for long. A woman capable of preventing international disaster with nothing but her voice instantly became someone worth watching. Damien found himself asking a question that refused to leave his mind. Why would someone with abilities worthy of international negotiations choose to spend her days carrying coffee trays through hotel corridors? Before he could investigate further, an elderly Italian executive slowly stood from his chair. His eyes remained fixed on Olivia with unmistakable recognition. Then, in careful English, he spoke the words that stunned the entire room. "I know this young woman. She once worked for one of the most elite diplomatic organizations in the world." The elderly Italian executive's words settled over the ballroom with unexpected weight. Conversations faded into silence once again as dozens of curious eyes turned toward Olivia Carter. She remained standing beside the silver coffee cart, her fingers lightly wrapped around its polished handle, wishing the attention would disappear as quickly as it had arrived. For years she had worked carefully to become invisible. Yet in a single morning, the life she had buried beneath a simple housekeeping uniform had quietly returned. The executive smiled gently before speaking again. Nearly 7 years earlier, Olivia had been one of the youngest government interpreters ever assigned to America's International Diplomatic Service. Despite her age, she possessed extraordinary fluency in multiple languages and an uncommon understanding of international law. Senior ambassadors trusted her precision because she translated every sentence exactly as spoken, never adding emotion, opinion, or personal influence. In high-level negotiations, that level of integrity was exceptionally rare. Olivia lowered her eyes, hoping the conversation would end there. It did not. The executive explained that her promising career had ended suddenly during a multinational trade conference in Geneva. Behind closed doors, several corrupt officials attempted to manipulate carefully negotiated agreements by quietly altering critical translations before foreign delegations could notice. Olivia had refused. Instead of protecting powerful careers, she reported the deception through official channels. The investigation that followed embarrassed influential people whose reputations depended on silence. Although she had done the right thing, remaining inside that world became impossible. There was another reason she disappeared. Her younger sister Emma had unknowingly become vulnerable after certain officials realized Olivia would never cooperate with corruption. Rather than risk placing her family in greater danger, Olivia quietly resigned from government service, erased every professional connection she had built, and accepted ordinary housekeeping work under a simplified employment record. She traded international conference halls for hotel corridors because anonymity offered something wealth never could: safety. The ballroom remained unusually quiet after the story ended. Many executives struggled to understand why someone capable of negotiating between world leaders would willingly polish marble floors and refill coffee cups. Yet Olivia never looked ashamed. She had surrendered prestige, influence, and remarkable opportunities without regret because protecting her younger sister mattered more than titles or recognition. Loyalty to family had always guided her decisions, even when those choices cost everything she had worked to achieve. Damien Moretti observed her carefully throughout the remainder of the negotiations. Unlike others, he noticed what Olivia never said. She never defended herself, exaggerated her achievements, or asked anyone to admire her sacrifices. She simply returned to serving coffee as though the discussion belonged to someone else. Damien recognized that kind of quiet character immediately. In his world, people endlessly chased power, wealth, and influence. Olivia had walked away from all three without hesitation. That decision impressed him far more than her remarkable intelligence ever could. Before sunset, Damien quietly instructed Marco to conduct a confidential background investigation. Hours later, a detailed report arrived inside his private office. Every record confirmed the same remarkable pattern. Olivia's professional evaluations described her as exceptionally intelligent, completely trustworthy, and unwilling to compromise truth under pressure. There were no unexplained financial transfers, hidden criminal associations, or suspicious relationships. Instead, Damien found years of quiet volunteer work, anonymous charitable donations, and repeated examples of personal sacrifice for others. The deeper he looked, the more difficult it became to understand why someone like Olivia had been left carrying trays instead of leading international negotiations. The following morning, Damien invited Olivia into one of the hotel's private conference rooms before negotiations resumed. The atmosphere felt surprisingly informal. No executives waited outside. No lawyers filled the chairs. Damien simply thanked her for saving an agreement upon which thousands of honest employees depended. He then offered her a temporary position as his official interpreter until the summit concluded. The compensation exceeded anything Olivia had earned in years. She listened respectfully before gently shaking her head. Money had never influenced her decisions. Damien remained silent, allowing her to finish. Olivia quietly explained that if the agreement failed, shipping companies would begin immediate restructuring. Hundreds of ordinary hotel workers, warehouse employees, dock crews, drivers, and administrative staff would likely lose their jobs despite having done nothing wrong. She would accept the temporary position only if it protected those innocent families whose futures depended upon the negotiations. Her answer surprised Damien once again. Even now, she measured success not by personal gain but by the lives she could quietly protect. For the first time in many years, Damien smiled. Then welcome to the Moretti team. Neither of them noticed Marco entering moments later with unusual urgency. His normally composed expression had changed completely. He placed a confidential intelligence file onto Damien's desk and spoke in a low whisper. "Boss, someone already knows about Olivia." Damien opened the report. His expression instantly hardened. A multimillion-dollar bounty had just been issued for the woman who had translated a single sentence. The intelligence report remained open on Damien Moretti's desk long after everyone else had left the room. Every verified detail pointed toward one unsettling truth. His trusted interpreter had not collapsed because of illness. Laboratory analysis confirmed that a rare, fast-acting substance had been slipped into the bottled water minutes before the summit began. The timing had been flawless. Remove the interpreter, create confusion between foreign delegations, destroy the $12 billion agreement, and force the Moretti empire into public humiliation. What had appeared to be an unfortunate emergency was, in reality, the opening move of a carefully planned betrayal. Damien quietly ordered Marco to expand the investigation without informing the rest of the organization. Every surveillance recording, employee access log, catering record, and security checkpoint from the hotel was reviewed frame by frame. The evidence eventually revealed a disturbing pattern. A senior logistics consultant had quietly entered the interpreter's preparation room shortly before the meeting began. His security badge had been approved personally by Victor Moretti, Damien's ambitious cousin and one of the empire's rising executives. Victor had always appeared loyal. He attended family meetings, celebrated company victories, and publicly praised Damien's leadership. Yet behind polished smiles and expensive suits, he carried a very different ambition. Victor believed the Moretti empire should be ruled through fear alone, without compromise or diplomacy. Secret financial records soon uncovered hidden transactions linking him to rival syndicates operating through offshore shipping companies. If the international agreement collapsed, Damien's reputation would weaken overnight. Investors would lose confidence, foreign partners would withdraw, and Victor intended to present himself as the only leader capable of rebuilding what remained. Betrayal had never been about money. It had always been about the throne. Unfortunately, Victor's original plan had failed because one quiet hotel maid refused to ignore the truth. Olivia Carter had unknowingly become the greatest obstacle standing between Victor and the empire he wanted to control. Her flawless translations had rescued the negotiations, exposed inconsistencies his allies depended upon, and attracted attention he never expected. By simply telling the truth, Olivia had quietly dismantled months of planning. From that moment forward, her name appeared beside Damien's on every confidential report intercepted from rival organizations. Marco's security division soon confirmed another troubling discovery. Unknown individuals had begun quietly following Olivia after work. Different faces appeared outside her apartment building, near grocery stores, subway stations, and neighborhood cafes. None approached her directly. None spoke. They simply observed her routines with careful patience before disappearing again. Their discipline suggested professional surveillance rather than random curiosity. Damien immediately understood the message. Olivia was no longer merely a witness. She had become a target. Without asking her permission, Damien assigned 2 elite security specialists to remain close enough to intervene if danger appeared but distant enough to preserve her independence. They dressed like ordinary professionals, blending naturally into crowded streets while discreetly monitoring every location she visited. Olivia noticed them almost immediately. At first, she believed they were investigators connected to the summit. Only later did Damien explain the truth. Someone intended to silence the woman who had protected the agreement. The revelation filled Olivia with quiet guilt. She looked around the luxurious conference room where dozens of loyal employees worked tirelessly preparing the next round of international meetings. Every additional security measure, every redirected vehicle, every extra guard seemed connected to her presence. She softly admitted that perhaps everything would become safer if she simply walked away. After all, she had entered Damien's world unexpectedly. Maybe leaving would remove the danger following everyone else. Damien listened carefully before answering. He reminded every captain gathered inside the room that Olivia had never created the threat. She had exposed it. If she had remained silent, the empire would already be collapsing beneath deception. Protecting Olivia was no longer an act of personal gratitude. It was now essential to protecting every honest employee, international partner, and family whose future depended upon the agreement she had saved. His voice remained calm, but every word carried the unmistakable authority of a king. From that moment forward, anyone threatening Olivia would be considered a direct threat against the Moretti Empire itself. For the first time since accepting the temporary position, Olivia truly understood what Damien meant when he spoke about loyalty. It was not blind obedience. It was standing beside people who chose truth even when truth invited danger. Late that evening, while returning confidential documents to an executive office, Olivia noticed a partially open conference room door. Familiar voices drifted into the hallway. She recognized Victor Moretti almost instantly. Remaining unseen, she paused only long enough to hear one sentence before her heart pounding drowned out every other sound. Victor quietly revealed the exact location where Damien would be waiting alone during tomorrow's harbor inspection. Someone else answered with a single chilling promise. This time, the king will never leave the docks. Olivia barely remembered leaving the conference corridor. Her heart pounding echoed louder than her footsteps as Victor's whispered plan repeated inside her mind. Every instinct urged her to remain silent. Exposing Victor meant placing herself directly between two powerful forces she had never intended to challenge. Yet another thought refused to leave her. If she said nothing, an honest man who had trusted her would unknowingly walk into a carefully prepared trap. Before fear could convince her otherwise, Olivia found Marco and quietly repeated every word she had overheard. Damien's schedule changed immediately. The following morning, the harbor inspection was cancelled without explanation, and an alternate route was arranged minutes before the original convoy was scheduled to depart. Several suspicious individuals waiting near the abandoned shipping terminal quietly disappeared after realizing Damien would never arrive. The plan collapsed before it could unfold. Marco later admitted that Olivia's warning had prevented a disaster capable of throwing the entire Moretti Empire into chaos. Damien looked toward her with calm appreciation, saying very little, yet Olivia understood from his expression that trust had silently taken root between them. The international negotiations continued over the following weeks, becoming even more complex as financial institutions, shipping corporations, and foreign governments finalized the historic agreement. Damien no longer relied solely on legal advisors. During every sensitive discussion, Olivia remained seated beside him, translating every sentence with remarkable precision. She noticed subtle differences in wording that experienced attorneys often overlooked. One afternoon, while reviewing revised banking documents, she quietly paused over a single paragraph describing international transfer guarantees. Something about the language felt deliberately unusual. Rather than making assumptions, Olivia requested the original versions drafted in Italian and Japanese. She compared every sentence carefully before discovering that one financial clause had been intentionally written differently in each language. Individually, neither document appeared suspicious. Together, however, they created an invisible loophole allowing billions of dollars to disappear through offshore shell companies after the agreement became active. The deception had been hidden inside language itself. Olivia calmly explained the discrepancy before anyone signed the final draft. Auditors immediately confirmed her findings, exposing an enormous financial fraud that could have damaged businesses across 3 continents. News of her discovery spread rapidly through the Moretti organization. The captains who had once viewed her as an ordinary hotel maid now greeted her with genuine respect whenever she entered a meeting. They admired something far greater than intelligence. Olivia never sought praise after solving another crisis. She quietly returned to work as though protecting people was simply the natural thing to do. Her calm professionalism reminded many seasoned leaders that true strength often arrived without raising its voice. Loyalty, they realized, was not always proven through force. Sometimes it was proven by refusing to compromise the truth. Damien found himself depending on Olivia more than anyone else during private negotiations. Whenever unfamiliar contracts arrived from overseas or delicate diplomatic conversations required absolute precision, he instinctively looked toward her before making important decisions. Olivia never attempted to influence outcomes for personal benefit. She presented facts clearly, respected every culture represented at the table, and protected the integrity of every discussion. For a man surrounded by ambition and hidden agendas, her honesty became something rare enough to treasure. Their connection deepened naturally through quiet moments rather than dramatic declarations. Late evenings often found them reviewing documents together inside Damien's private library while Manhattan's skyline shimmered beyond the windows. They spoke about languages, family, responsibility, and the strange paths that had led them together. Olivia slowly realized Damien carried far more compassion than the ruthless reputation surrounding his name suggested. Damien, in turn, admired the remarkable strength hidden behind her gentle nature. She had never sought power, yet she possessed the ability to protect an empire simply by understanding the meaning of words. Standing alone beside the hotel's panoramic windows one evening, Olivia reflected on everything that had changed since carrying coffee through the conference hall. She finally understood that intelligence could shape history more effectively than intimidation ever could. She was not a victim forced into extraordinary circumstances. She became powerful because she refused to surrender honesty when deception seemed easier. Without realizing it, many inside the Moretti Empire had already begun referring to her quietly as the future queen standing beside their king. The evening before the final international contract signing, Olivia finished organizing confidential documents and entered the hotel's underground parking garage, believing another ordinary workday had ended. Damien's security team had been delayed by an unexpected emergency only minutes earlier. The corridor ahead appeared completely empty. Then she noticed something resting on the driver's seat of her car. It was a single white orchid. Victor Moretti had sent identical flowers to every business partner before quietly betraying them. A cold breath caught in Olivia's chest. Before she could turn around, a familiar voice emerged from the darkness behind her. "You're coming with me, Miss Carter? The Empire needs its queen removed before the king wins." The white orchid left behind in the parking garage told Damien Moretti everything he needed to know before Marco even finished his report. Olivia Carter had vanished only hours before the final international contract signing, and every security camera covering the underground level had been disabled with remarkable precision. Damien stared silently at the abandoned vehicle, his expression colder than anyone in the Empire had seen in years. Olivia had never asked to become part of his world, yet because she chose honesty over silence, she had become the center of a conflict far greater than herself. This was no longer only about protecting an employee. It was about protecting the woman whose loyalty had preserved the future of the Moretti Empire. Across Manhattan, the Grand Conference Hall filled with diplomats, investors, and foreign ministers waiting for Damien's arrival. The $12 billion agreement rested untouched on the polished conference table while financial news outlets speculated about unexpected delays. International partners exchanged uncertain glances as every passing minute increased market anxiety. Damien's advisors urged him to attend the signing first and organize Olivia's rescue afterward. Losing the agreement would damage thousands of employees and years of strategic planning. Damien listened quietly before closing the contract folder with one deliberate movement. He chose Olivia. Without another word, he walked away from the negotiation table. The decision stunned everyone present. Foreign delegations postponed the signing until further notice, recognizing that something far more serious than ordinary business had interrupted the summit. Rumors spread through global financial markets within the hour. Investors questioned whether the historic agreement would survive. Shipping stocks fluctuated sharply while rival corporations quietly prepared to exploit any weakness inside the Moretti organization. A financial war had begun before a single document received its final signature. Victor Moretti wasted no time. The moment Damien left the conference hall, hidden allies launched coordinated pressure against Moretti-controlled businesses across New York. Shipping permits were suddenly challenged, cargo inspections multiplied without explanation, banking transfers slowed, insurance claims appeared simultaneously, and confidential negotiations mysteriously collapsed. Every attack targeted the empire's financial foundation instead of its people. Victor understood that destroying confidence could weaken an organization more effectively than open confrontation. He wanted Damien overwhelmed by impossible choices, forced to decide whether to save his empire or the woman he refused to abandon. Inside Moretti headquarters, loyal captains moved with remarkable discipline. Marco coordinated emergency responses while department directors protected critical operations from spreading panic. Employees continued working despite growing uncertainty because they trusted Damien's leadership completely. Their loyalty did not depend upon favorable circumstances. It rested upon years of earned respect. Damien had always protected those who stood beside him. Now the entire empire quietly prepared to protect him in return. Meanwhile, Olivia remained far from Manhattan inside an isolated estate hidden beyond the city. Victor believed captivity would eventually force Damien into surrender, but he underestimated the woman sitting quietly inside the elegant library where financial ledgers and confidential business files covered a long mahogany table. Guards assumed Olivia felt too frightened to notice anything beyond her immediate situation. Instead, years of diplomatic training quietly returned. Every invoice, account number, company name, and shipping schedule that crossed her path settled carefully into memory. Without touching a single document, she began reconstructing Victor's hidden financial network piece by piece. She realized that information, not fear, remained her greatest strength. As night settled across New York, Damien studied detailed maps spread throughout the Moretti command center. Intelligence suggested Victor's strongest allies operated from an isolated riverside compound outside the city. Damien understood the coming hours would demand more than courage. He would need to win two battles at once. One would determine the future of his business empire before international markets collapsed. The other would determine whether Olivia returned home safely. For the first time in decades, the king faced both a financial war and a mafia war simultaneously, yet his determination never wavered. Before dawn, Damien's convoy quietly reached the heavily guarded estate identified by Marco's investigation. Every available clue pointed toward Olivia's location. The gate stood open. Lights still burned inside the mansion. Furniture remained untouched, meals sat unfinished upon the dining table, and fresh coffee steamed gently from abandoned cups. Everything suggested people had departed only moments earlier. Damien searched every room himself. The library, the offices, the private suites, nothing. Only one object remained waiting at the center of the empty conference table. A leather notebook. Inside the first page, written in Olivia's unmistakable handwriting, was a single message. I memorized everything, but Victor knew you would come. He's already moved me somewhere else. Damien Moretti read Olivia's handwritten message twice before quietly closing the leather notebook. Instead of despair, he recognized something hidden inside her words. Olivia had not written like a frightened captive waiting to be rescued. She had written like someone who already possessed the information needed to defeat the people holding her. Marco immediately understood the same thing. Olivia had spent her captivity observing instead of panicking. The enemy believed they had imprisoned a quiet interpreter. In reality, they had given one of the world's sharpest analytical minds unrestricted access to their greatest secrets. Miles away, Olivia remained remarkably composed inside another secluded estate. Victor believed constant surveillance had stripped away every possibility of escape, but he underestimated her greatest strength. She carefully memorized employee routines, security schedules, transportation manifests, and coded financial conversations. During an unexpected inspection by international auditors connected to Victor's overseas companies, Olivia politely requested permission to clarify several multilingual shipping documents. The officials recognized her diplomatic credentials from years earlier and agreed without hesitation. While reviewing the files, Olivia quietly highlighted inconsistencies hidden across Italian, Japanese, and English contracts. Within minutes, experienced investigators realized the documents revealed an enormous international conspiracy involving fraudulent companies, illegal financial transfers, and manipulated shipping agreements stretching across multiple countries. The discovery changed everything. Federal investigators immediately launched coordinated financial inquiries against Victor's network and every syndicate secretly supporting him. Banks froze suspicious accounts, customs officials suspended questionable cargo routes, and international regulators requested emergency audits before additional contracts could be approved. Businesses that had quietly financed Victor's ambitions suddenly distanced themselves overnight. His carefully constructed alliance began collapsing without a single public confrontation. The greatest threat to his organization had not been armed opposition. It had been one honest woman who understood the true meaning behind carefully chosen words. Damien received confirmation of the investigation only hours later. Every financial record Olivia had identified matched intelligence already gathered by the Moretti organization. Victor's influence weakened rapidly as longtime supporters realized his promises had been built upon deception instead of loyalty. Moretti captains quietly reclaimed critical shipping terminals, business partners renewed suspended agreements, and foreign investors restored their confidence in the empire. Damien did not celebrate Victor's downfall. He focused entirely on bringing Olivia home safely, knowing none of these victories would have been possible without her remarkable courage. Late that evening, Olivia finally reunited with Damien inside Moretti headquarters. The atmosphere remained unusually emotional. Employees who had only weeks earlier known her as the quiet maid now welcomed her with genuine admiration. Senior executives thanked her personally for protecting thousands of jobs. International legal advisors praised the precision of her observations, acknowledging that even experienced investigators had overlooked details she recognized immediately. The Japanese delegation respectfully bowed before her, while the Italian representatives described her integrity as the reason international trust had survived the crisis. For the first time in years, Olivia accepted recognition without trying to disappear into the background. The Moretti captains stood together in respectful silence as she entered the main conference room. Many remembered the morning they had quietly questioned why Damien allowed a hotel maid anywhere near sensitive negotiations. Now every one of them understood. Olivia had repeatedly protected the empire without demanding authority, wealth, or influence. She had defended innocent employees, preserved international partnerships, exposed hidden corruption, and restored confidence across global markets. Their respect no longer came from Damien's opinion. It came from witnessing extraordinary character with their own eyes. Damien looked around the room before quietly speaking. He admitted that everyone had believed the empire's greatest strength rested in its ships, investments, and worldwide influence. They had all been mistaken. Real strength belonged to people who chose honesty when deception offered easier rewards. Olivia had reminded him that leadership meant protecting truth before protecting reputation. She had entered his life wearing the uniform of a maid, yet through quiet intelligence and unwavering courage she had become the foundation upon which the empire now stood. She was not a victim. She became powerful because she never allowed fear to replace integrity. Olivia smiled gently, understanding that the greatest victory had never belonged to one person alone. It belonged to every honest worker, captain, translator, and employee who had refused to surrender their principles despite overwhelming pressure. For the first time since the summit began, the future finally felt safe. Then Marco entered the conference room carrying a sealed envelope marked with the highest security classification. He handed it directly to Damien. After reading the contents, Damien slowly looked toward Olivia before turning to every captain gathered inside. His calm voice carried through the silent room. Invite every Mafia leader, every international investor, and every foreign partner. It's time to make the one announcement that will change the future of the Moretti Empire forever. Victor Moretti's fall came quietly, but its consequences reached across continents. The financial records Olivia had memorized, combined with the evidence gathered by federal investigators, exposed every hidden account, false company, and secret alliance supporting his conspiracy. The man who had tried to seize the Moretti throne through betrayal now faced justice without the protection of wealth, family influence, or rival syndicates. His organization collapsed beneath the truth he had spent years attempting to control. Damien did not celebrate. He simply watched the final report close and understood that the greatest danger to an empire was never an enemy standing outside its gates. It was ambition disguised as loyalty within them. 3 days later, the historic international summit resumed inside the same Grand Manhattan Conference Hall where everything had begun. The long polished table once again held the final documents connecting American, Italian, and Japanese shipping networks. This time, every translation had been reviewed by Olivia Carter personally. Every legal clause carried identical meaning in all 3 languages. Every hidden loophole had been removed. At exactly noon, representatives from each delegation signed the $12 billion agreement beneath the gaze of investors, diplomats, business leaders, and mafia captains from across the city. Applause filled the hall as the final signature touched the page. The Moretti Empire had survived financial war, internal betrayal, international sabotage, and an attack upon its king. Yet it emerged stronger than before because its foundation had changed. Fear and control had once protected its borders, but Damien now understood that lasting power required trust, discipline, and people courageous enough to defend the truth. Thousands of employees kept their jobs. Families connected to shipping terminals, warehouses, offices, and hotels remained safe. The agreement Olivia saved did not merely preserve billions of dollars. It protected countless ordinary lives that powerful men had nearly treated as acceptable losses. When the applause faded, Damien remained standing at the head of the table. The room became silent. He looked across the same executives who had laughed when Olivia first spoke. Many lowered their eyes, remembering how quickly they had judged her because of the uniform she wore. Damien did not embarrass them. Instead, he spoke about character. He explained that status could be inherited, wealth could be purchased, and influence could be manipulated, but integrity could only be proven through difficult choices. Olivia had been offered silence, safety, and personal reward more than once. Each time she chose to protect people who might never know her name. Then Damien turned toward her. Olivia stood near the conference doors wearing an elegant ivory suit, her chestnut hair falling softly around her shoulders. She looked composed, yet her heart pounding made every breath feel unsteady. Weeks earlier, she had occupied the same room while carrying coffee for people who never noticed her face. Now world leaders and billionaire investors waited for Damien to speak her name. He announced that Olivia Carter would become the Moretti Empire's chief international advisor, holding authority over every foreign negotiation, translation division, and diplomatic partnership. No agreement would move forward without her approval. No employee would be expected to remain silent when truth was in danger. Her office would not be hidden behind executives or family titles. She would stand close to the center of every important decision. The executives who once dismissed the Maid rose first. Then the foreign ministers stood. One by one, investors, captains, lawyers, and international partners joined them until the entire hall applauded the woman they had once considered invisible. Olivia did not smile because she had gained power. She smiled because honest work, quiet courage, and unwavering loyalty had finally been seen. But Damien had one final announcement. For years, political families and wealthy socialites had offered alliances through marriage, influence, and money. Damien had rejected them all because none had understood the weight of standing beside a king. Olivia had never asked for that place. She had earned it by protecting his people, challenging deception, and reminding him that an empire without compassion was only another prison built from fear. Damien stepped toward her and offered his hand. His voice fell to a low whisper meant for her, yet the room heard every word. "You saved what was mine long before I understood you had become the greatest part of it." Olivia placed her hand in his. The hall erupted once more as Damien publicly declared that the woman who had saved his empire with nothing but intelligence, courage, and truth would stand beside him forever. Not as a maid, not as a symbol, but as the queen of the Moretti Empire. And inside the same room where everyone once ignored her, Olivia Carter finally stood beside the king. Not because he gave her power, but because she had already become powerful. Before this story comes to its unforgettable ending, take a moment to support the channel by liking this video, sharing it with someone who loves powerful mafia romance stories, and subscribing so you never miss our next cinematic journey. You never know which ordinary person will become the hero of the next story. But before you leave, here's something I'd genuinely love to know. If you had been in Damien's place, would you have trusted the quiet maid when an entire room full of billionaires believed she was wrong? Or would you have walked away and lost everything? There are no right or wrong answers, but I have a feeling the comments are going to be divided. Tell me what you would have done and why.